Big finish, but it doesn't time up with my countdown timer. So here we are, a couple of seconds early. Welcome back to Meet the Ecamm fam. I'm so excited that you're all here with me today or catching it later in the replay. You can always drop questions into the chat. Put a Q and a colon in front of it so it's easier for us to find. And you can always be on this show. So if you're here watching with us on YouTube, you can swing into the description. You'll be able to grab that link and you can book time to come on. A couple things. You have to be nice because this is a Canadian show. You also have to be part of the Ecamm fam. Otherwise, why would you want to be on the show? Well, I'm excited to be hanging out here today. We've been off for a little bit, so if I'm rusty, it's completely my fault from a long-term break. But I'm hanging out here with Andy. Thanks so much for hanging out today, Andy.
Hey, good to be on. And
for those of you who don't know, Andy has been killing it lately in the Ecamm fam, rose up in the ranks of the fam and has earned all kinds of credentials, and most recently has joined us as one of our moderators. So thank you for everything you've been doing, Andy. We have been noticing.
You are welcome. You know, the Ecamm fam is just an amazing family. Once I got into the community, and I'm an IT person by day, and so I naturally am a helper. You know, I started in the help desk, and so when I started joining the Facebook community and saw people asking all sorts of questions, I just naturally wanted to answer them, and so I did.
Yeah, it's been this endless sort of joke with us here that part of having the community on a Facebook group is a nightmare because Facebook is constantly making updates and changes, and it's always the lack of control is upsetting to those of us who are control freaks. But the fact that it's just in the feed and you see questions coming through is completely wonderful if you're like Andy and I and you're need to answer things because you see it come up and you're oh, I know the answer to that, and quickly it becomes an hour or two that you're sitting on the sofa or should be doing other things. And it's
the worst part about it though is when I'm not in front of my computer and I know kind of what the interface looks like, but I can't get the words down directly, and I'm I'll just do a video later because it's easier than trying to describe
I can answer it. Yeah. Exactly. Well, let's do a shout out here to a couple people that are hanging out with us. We have Mr. Paul Duncan in the house. We have Video Like a Dad hanging out. I see Jeremy. I always feel like this is like Reading Rainbow where we see everyone coming in. And Tatiana is hanging out. And George, who's also been rising in the ranks and winning all the stuff lately. Hey, George, we have your Ecamm sunglasses on their way to you here soon. So thanks for always hanging out and playing.
I almost brought my Ecamm Fam Gold mug today to work. It's at home. I usually drink out of it when I'm working from home, but
Oh,
I
I don't
almost
have
brought
it
it to
behind
the
me.
show today. Yeah.
Well, I'm rocking today. I will do a shout out to another. So this one is a joke on recovering perfectionist. It's like misspelled. It's a little triggering for me, but I kind of love it. This is
That's awesome.
Ian Anderson Gray, who's a member of the fam. He has just launched his new Fourth Wall merch shop, and his stuff is really super fun. I had to like fight. I was like, only two, Katie, only two t-shirts. Don't
Nice.
get overwhelmed. So yeah, it has been a lot of fun to see everyone kind of jumping in with the swag game. It's been fun. We have hey, Collie's helping out. She's saying IT help desks make the world go round. They do.
True.
They do. We salute you. Well, Andy, let's jump in. This show is all about like your Ecamm journey. So why don't you let us know, who you are and kind of how you found Ecamm and where you are now in the world of Ecamm.
Sure. So I'm a podcaster from way back. I started a show in 2007. The show is still going on. I'm not part of it anymore, but I started
That's
it
awesome.
back when podcasting was just kind of beginning. And I was using, at that point, it was, what was it called? There's some like phone service that you could get live call in things.
Oh
And
yeah.
oh, it was TalkShoe. I was using TalkShoe.
Uh-huh.
And awful audio quality, right? And so some time went by. I moved, let the show go. Somebody else has it, and I recently, a couple of years ago, 5 years ago to be exact, a friend of mine said, "Hey, you want to start a podcast called Dudes and Dads Podcast?" And at that time, I was I was doing school online. I was going to college online, and I had a family to take care of and a full-time job. And so I said, absolutely not. And so some time passed, and I ended up being done with school. And so we started this podcast. And when we started it, I was like, I'd like to do some video stuff too, just kind of record it and stream it. I started using OBS, which, as we all know,
We
is
love
not great.
OBS.
Yeah, sure.
Big
Sure we do.
fans. Yeah.
And I remember the first time I saw Ecamm, I was like, I don't know that I like this because there's so many windows and it seems like a lot going on.
Yeah.
And then I actually tried it, and it was like, this is amazing. This is a software that I have to have in my life for the rest of my life. And became an Ecamm subscriber. Started doing the show on Ecamm, and part of the reason I liked it is because the comments, the overlays, and stuff, and just how easy it actually was once I dug into it. And so that's where it started. And then, like I said earlier, I jumped into the community pretty quickly and was able to answer some questions and just got into that and being able to be helpful. And then, then I ended up becoming a moderator. So I'm moderating now too. So
We've somehow tricked you into starting it with absolutely not. I have no time to like, sure.
yeah, exactly. I'll do it all.
Yeah, it's a superhero trait of ours. Like get people to say yes. Yeah, it is interesting that Ecamm definitely has like all of these windows, and you really can do a ton with it. And I think what's been tricky for us on the marketing standpoint is trying to convince people to close some of those windows and start with what or start with what kind of the basics and be able to work your way up, because the windows are not for everyone, right? Like
No.
all the windows are not for all the people. Like you might really just want to stay here in the kind of live streaming space and have, your scenes and your overlays and your sound effects and like a comments and reactions window. You might not need virtual camera. You might not need, preview mode. I never, ever, ever use preview, but there are lots of people who do. And that's like if you're like a remote producer or you're doing larger productions. So I feel like kind of finding your features is like an integral part of being part of the Ecamm fam. It's like
Right.
really finding the ones that work best for you.
Yeah, and that's for me. Yeah, I started out when we started doing the podcast. A lot of our guests, we do a little bit of it in person and a little bit remote, and so
Yeah.
we had been using some other remote tool to do the video stuff, and I started doing that with Zoom and just kind of then showing the Zoom window in OBS, and then when I found Ecamm, we completely switched over to that, and
Yeah.
you're doing all of our interviews through interview mode because it's just so easy to bring
Yeah.
guests in and have them write, quote unquote, in your studio. and not have to worry about screen sharing like the Zoom window or things like that. So yes, it absolutely changed the way that I do podcasting, and now because again it's just so integrated. And in fact, one of my other side projects too is a podcast called Podcast Answers, where
Mhm.
I answer people's podcast questions and help them get started podcasting. So yeah, so I kind of went all in in it with it.
I love it. Well, I mean, podcasting has been such an interesting space. Like, I feel like I've learned a ton over the last couple of
Mhm.
years since we started up our video podcast, The Flow. What I think has been like really fascinating for me, and I'm interested in your perspective of this because you kind of have that long history of it, but then kind of, have changed your podcast experience, I guess, over the last
Sure.
couple of years. But it's been really interesting in the last couple of events that we've been to. This very like almost like two sides of the coin, like the OG original podcasters who kind of fought their way through like a bunch of challenges. It wasn't easy at all. Like, video was something that was incredibly difficult, and many of
Hmm.
them, started in the audio space and have gotten like really comfortable and have these really huge shows there. And they don't really want to do video by and large. They're
Hmm.
like, oh, they're they're fighting tooth and nail for all justified reasons, like a ton of
Hmm.
different things. Whereas someone like me who has zero experience in podcasting, but I'm comfortable now with Ecamm, it took me maybe 15 minutes to start up my podcast that I do with my best friend, and like it gets
Hmm.
easier every single episode, and I have like full video graphics, all like everything. And it is funny that there's kind of this line in the podcasting journey where it went from being hard and something that was only available really to people who super wanted it to now like any not any idiot, but any idiot can jump on. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Do you in your kind of answering podcast questions, do you get a lot of questions about like video versus audio, or about kind of like old school podcasting versus new school podcasting?
Not. I mean, not a lot. I try to help people wherever if they want to
Wherever
start a
they are,
podcast,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
if they want to do video, then it's really easy. And I know I had Doc on one time, and I am an old school podcaster, and he's all like, "Oh, you don't need RSS is dead,"
Yeah.
and it triggered me a little bit. I was like, "Oh, Doc, let's fight." But no, like I've come back into the mindset now of it's really just a show. A
Yeah.
podcast is the delivery format. It
Yep.
can be a show on YouTube. It can be a show
Yep.
via RSS and the podcast apps. And so for me, yeah, a show is just a show. And if you can do it with audio and video, then that's even better. Because for the nice thing about video is people can watch live as you're recording it, and then be part of the show. That's
Yeah.
the great thing about Ecamm is you can see all of your comments right there, and you can bring them on screen, and people can be part of the show.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and I hear while we're at it, so let's let everyone know what your podcast is called again. I know Paul dropped it.
Sure. Yeah.
Here's your teaser.
So dudesanddadspodcast.com is the Dudes and Dads podcast, and then podcastanswers.com is my other one.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Dudes and Dads podcast. What are you all talking about? How many people are on the show? What's the format?
Sure. So it is our whole goal is to kind of just create community through storytelling and just just creating community. So we interview people that that have great stories. So it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody talking about parenting and things like. Well, we do cover a lot of parenting topics
Yeah.
also, but anybody that we think have a great story. And actually, one of the things that was really cool is one of our first episodes, somebody that we knew in their adult just found out who their real dad was. Like they
Oh,
didn't
wow.
know growing up who their dad was. And so we got a chance to talk with him and go through that journey
Yeah.
and have him explain how that happened. And then since then, he's really connected with his biological dad and was able to start a friendship, and he's older than I am. And so it's kind of cool to be able to watch that happen. And we've had a lot of things from, we've had a lot of different stories from like adoption and just different different topics like that. So it's really just a wide range of things. Pretty much anyone that we think has a great story, we like to talk to.
That's awesome. Well, there's Tatiana's next question. Are dudettes and non-parents allowed on the show?
Yes, absolutely. We've had lots of dudettes, ranging from both me and my co-host wives have been on, as well as some other different women that we're friends with too have also been on the show and are allowed to listen. So Tatiana, come subscribe today.
So G. Albert wants to know if you have used NDI6 or if you're a straight up Ecamm dude.
I am really a straight up Ecamm person. So yeah.
He's only going to say that here, G. Albert. So
no,
don't try to trick him now.
That's not 100% true. So I do a lot of the tech stuff at our church that I go to too.
Sure.
And so I do a lot of the video streaming there for our live stream. And don't tell them, but we're not using Ecamm yet. So I mean, we're using a Blackmagic switcher and going straight out to the internet from that. So unfortunately, we're not using Ecamm for that. But everything personal, I use Ecamm for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, churches are such an interesting, they've been sort of an interesting customer type for us because obviously, many churches already have a lot of like sound equipment and video equipment because obviously they're doing live productions every single week, right? So it is it has been interesting kind of watching churches navigate this space kind of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So I'm sure.
Yeah, that's actually so when the pandemic hit, like I was really we had not been live streaming up until that point. We've been recording our stuff for all of our older people.
Sure.
And that can't make it out, but we hadn't really been putting it on YouTube, but not really doing it live. And so since I had the experience of doing the podcast and doing it live, I brought my laptop in and we did it like that for a while. And then since then we've upgraded our production studio and made it a actual like official production. But it's an interesting thing.
That's awesome. All right. So what's the most common podcast question that you get on the show?
I had probably the most recent one was basically like, how do I know, like when I'm creating a name for my show, how do I know that it's going to be a good name and can I reserve the name? So that was an interesting one to me because I was like, no, you can't reserve the name, but the best thing to do is get out there and start producing content. So even if you don't plan on doing your show for a month and a half or whatever, go get your hosting. I suggest Captivate like you guys use because thanks to Doc, I was like, I checked out Captivate and I loved it. So so I suggest Captivate all the time. And so I said, go out there, get your web hosting or your hosting for your audio files, produce a trailer, you get it out there, put the name out there. And then I suggested also searching, in Apple Podcast and Podcast Index and some other places to see if it's a common name, because if it's a super common name like Let's Talk About It or Real Talk, like that's going to be hard to find. And you don't want that. You want to go ahead and get something that's going to be able to be found. And so that's what I suggested.
Yeah, I am totally humiliated to say that I completely did not do that. Like I was like so gung-ho about getting started with my podcast. I was like, we're the VHS Club. It's a great name. Did not look like anywhere at all as to whether or not it was taken. We lucked out in that it doesn't appear to be like an overly common podcast name, but there definitely are like social accounts and, and other businesses or groups that are called that. So we bump into that every now and then.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So it's an important part of it that, it's funny. I don't even know why I didn't think about that at all, but I completely didn't, which is, certainly embarrassing. So I'm not surprised that's a common question.
I've just had enough people I've seen where I'm trying to find their podcast and I search for it and then I'm like, which one of these 60 or 100 of them, which one is you? And so that's one of the things I suggest right away is trying to find something that's unique to you that's going to resonate with your audience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we obviously we tag a lot of accounts as we're, bringing people like you onto different shows that we're doing or things that it can sometimes be difficult to like find, you're like, I think this is them. We'll see if we add this in. So yeah, I think it's interesting. All right. Well, Lala's got a question. Hey, Lala. She wants to know, where does one have to go to have a podcast trailer done? Is there such a thing?
Ooh.
That's a good one.
So for me, I just go ahead and create it myself. So, I basically it's going to be something short, a minute, 2 minutes, something that's going to let your potential listeners know what your show is about. So for the Dudes and Dads, when we put it out, we basically introduced ourselves. I said, hey, I'm Andy, and this is what the show is going to be about, and you can expect to have new episodes every other Tuesday, and things like that. So really, it's just doing it yourself, just coming up with something short. If you have music that you use for your intro, put that music bed in there so it kind of has that same branding and theming to it.
Yeah. Yeah, we use Epidemic Sound for our music because it allows you pay a subscription fee, and you can get access to a ton of music. You can search by mood and all different kinds of search terms, but it allows you to use it in a number of places, copyright, not copyright free because you're paying for it, but like you're protected from any kind of strikes, which is great. So yeah, that's an important part too that I think people don't think about when they're starting up in like thinking about shows, whatever kind of show, whether it's a podcast or a live show like this one, is just being really careful and cautious about like the rights, like what you're allowed to use and do and what you're not allowed to use and do, depending on what platform you're on. And podcasting is tricky because you're going out to a number of different places, so you really have to think about where you're showing up and how you're showing up.
Yeah, so for us, what we did for the Dudes and Dads podcast is we went to something similar to Epidemic Sound, where you can buy, pay a flat fee for it, and we just found something that we liked, was able to use that and continue using that in our branding.
Yeah, it's funny how it totally becomes like part of your. I don't know if you're like this with your show, but like part of your, like you hear the song somewhere else and you're like, oh, that's my song. Yes. Like, it's just like part of your brand, part of your whole vibe.
I did that. I think it was the music that I'm using for Podcast Answers. There was some TV show or TV commercial that had it on, and I was like, "Wait,
funny.
That's the same song that I'm using."
You're like, "Oh, I'm famous. They're using my song." Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love it. These are some great questions coming through here. So yeah, Lala says she likes the trailers that she's heard so far. They sound really professional. Yeah, trailers are interesting too, because when you're just starting out, it's tricky to kind of figure out what you want in a trailer. Like, it's actually weirdly easier once you have a couple of episodes under your belt, because then you can pull, clips from an episode and do kind of like a sizzle reel. So it's really just like, what's the show going to be about? Like your kind of main selling points to get to entice people into it. I kind of want to redo mine. I did it and then we've gotten so much better just from consistently, doing episodes, that I'm like, oh, I should redo mine at some point and update it.
And you can't really submit your show to any podcast directories until you have some content up there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, especially if you're going to be trying to quote unquote, reserve your podcast name.
Yeah.
But you're not planning to put episodes out anytime soon. It's best to get that out there, because then you can actually submit yourself to all of the directories too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what hosting are you using for the site? That's another good question.
So for my site, I'm just using some generic hosting from HostMonster. So it's just something pretty
IT.
cheap.
Yeah. Like, I got this.
Yes.
Yeah. There's lots of tools out there, though. I think we did at one point interviewed Brendan, who's one of the creators of podpage.com. So if you're looking for like a podcasting specific website tool that just makes it easier for plebeians like us,
sure,
that's a good one.
because I'm such an IT person, like I actually create my own RSS feed for my podcast. So I do that all on I'm using WordPress as my actual like site content. And so I'm using that to create all my RSS feed for the podcast. So yeah, I'm kind of a geek in that when it comes to that. Most people, when I advise them to create a podcast, I tell them not to do that, just because it's a lot easier to go to something like Captivate and get a podcast, or like you said, pod sites.
Yeah, the good thing about a tool like Captivate, this show is not sponsored by Captivate. We have other shows sponsored by them, but not this one. But the good thing about them is that they actually will create a website for you when you are using them as a host. It's very kind of bare bones and simple, but it's a great starting point. And honestly, probably most of what you need anyway, as far as podcast sites go. It includes, each episode, and it updates automatically when you upload your new episodes in. So it's a good one.
And you can map a custom domain to it. So if you have something like, dudesandads.com or podcastanswers.com, you can map that to that site and use that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk. Let's geek out over Ecamm a little bit. So,
All right, let's do it.
all right. So, favorite feature, or what feature do you use most often?
Oh man, probably most often I use the guest feature, just because that's how I'm bringing everybody onto my show.
Yeah.
So that when they're not in studio with us, we do a mixture of both. But I like the comments too, just because it incites engagement. It helps people go, hey, like that's my comment on the screen there, and so it helps people want to comment, which makes it easier to podcast.
So do you do like us where you record your show live? Like you have elements of live streams as well as recorded video?
Yeah, so what we end up doing is we broadcast to all of our social channels.
Awesome.
We've been messing around with doing the Instagram one, but just because our whole show is in a wide format, that takes a whole nother computer for me to do that, sending NDI video across the network, and
Yeah.
and so we don't usually do Instagram, but yeah, we do it live, as far as Facebook, YouTube, and X, and so that way, yeah, we do a live show, and then usually what happens, we record Sunday evenings, and the podcast comes out on Tuesday, either the following Tuesday or the Tuesday after that, depending how much ahead of time we're prepared. So yeah.
Yeah, it's nice because it's so like it is a little bit forgiving in that once you have an audience, if you're not like you need to be consistent, but there is a little bit of wiggle room, which I think is nice. Yeah. Hey, we have Neil hanging out. It's moderator time. Neil hanging out with his wrench. Don't throw the wrench at anyone, Neil. Andy and I are hanging out up here. All right. So when you were first starting in Ecamm, you were saying lots of windows. How did you approach getting up and running? Like if you were speaking to someone who's brand new and just opening it, what advice would you give them for starting?
Definitely get the trial first, just to make sure, because that's what I did. I got the trial and started playing around with it, and then join the Facebook community, because that's going to be somewhere you're going to learn a lot, as well as watch the Let's Learn Ecamm show on Fridays, because that really honestly is where I learned a lot of the stuff, and still continue to learn a lot of stuff. Doc and Neil and everybody else who's on there. It's one of those things that I'm still constantly even learning different tips and tricks. And so that's what I would say. If you're just starting out, go to a show like that where you can see it kind of explained really simple, start to scratch, like this is your home, this is the rooms, this is, that type of thing that Doc likes to do, because that's where you're going to get a lot of your questions answered.
Yeah, it is amazing. So I'm like 4 years in at this point, and I'm still like almost every stream that I do, or every time I turn Ecamm on, I'm like, oh, I didn't know. There's so many like hidden features that I feel like sometimes like the smallest things make a big difference for me. Like they're one of the newer ones, a couple actually of the newer ones that the team added. One is the naming. So I was terrible with file management, as I've been very public about. And so now it's really nice because I've set it with the new feature that every time I start a recording, it automatically pops up and asks me to name it. And so then I've just got that out of the way. I make sure it's way easier for me to find anything later. So that has been huge. And then the other one I really like, which was a ask from Mary Lou Mandel, who's part of the Ecamm fam and an awesome creator herself. She asked for the ability to just grab like quick screen, like photos basically within, which has been great because often you're like, you finish doing a recording or you're trying to get like a good thumbnail, right? Like thumbnails are so important. And so that feature being just built right in to just like grab those is great. Because prior to that, I was recording these like, this is embarrassing, but maybe you've done this as well. I was grabbing these like short recordings with my co-host, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna record like a 30-second video, and we'll just like do different faces. So we'd be like, like this, and then when the video was done, then I could just grab the screenshots out of that later, which actually like is kind of ridiculous and fun, but it worked really well. So if you're looking for some pro tips, that was another fun one, because you're in like kind of the right mindset anyway. But
right.
But yeah, that was my my go-to for thumbnails.
The other thing that I've done recently is I've started, and I actually haven't. I've built it. I haven't actually put it into use yet, but I've built a few scenes at the end that are in my profile that are vertical focus. So that while the whole
Yeah.
layout is still horizontal, I have
Yep.
the layout to be
Yeah. Ready to
vertical.
go.
That way,
Yep.
right? So that way, at the end, I can, when we're done recording and stopping streaming, I can say, "Hey, can you give me a quick like promotional? I'm so and so, and I'm going to be on the show next." And then I have that, and it's ready to be, uploaded into whatever format that I need.
Yeah. 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 That made a big difference for me too. Cause I have such good intentions. I was like, every Wednesday I'm going to record a promo video. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it.
No,
But you know when I am going to do it? Immediately before or after when I'm recording. Cause I'm already there.
you're in the mindset. You're
You're in
ready
the
to go.
mindset. Yep. And then often, like you said, you have a guest. If you have a guest on your show, then the guest is there as well. It's a super easy ask. You're like an extra minute. Let us, share a pro tip or, get them to add that extra content. So it's
Yeah, and
it's an easy
usually
one.
we're chatting after the show, stream anyways. The stream ends, and me and the other host and guest are all kind of chatting a little bit, thanking them for being on. And so that's where we can do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Paul Dixon, who's an incredible, incredible designer. Paul,
Yes, he is.
I'm nowhere close in what I'm rocking right now, but you do some incredible work. Yeah. Paul said he uses the photo feature. And for anyone who hasn't heard of this one, because it's like one of those hidden features, you can do Shift Command G, and you can also set this up into your Stream Deck if you have a Stream Deck to just be able to like hit that button and grab that shot. Although you need to be in that, like a jazz hands mindset. If you're like me, you got to get the good photo. You don't want a bad
That's
photo.
when you put the Stream Deck key on a delay, and so that way you can push it and then make your
Three,
pose.
two, one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually one thing that I need to get better at. Are you a big Stream Deck power user?
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 of them that I use. So I have some of the 15 key ones, and then I have a couple of the pedals too.
Yeah.
So I like that, especially the pedal. While they're a little bit noisy when you push the buttons, if you push them light, it's okay. But it is nice to be able to, especially I have. So that anyone who doesn't know, the Stream Deck pedal has 3 buttons on it.
Yeah, I don't
And
have
it's a
the pedal, but I have the. Oh no, never mind. I'm gonna
Can't
set
get it.
things flying. I have the regular Stream Deck here.
But the
all the
pedal is
wires
nice
tied
because
together.
you can use it with your feet. And so for me, I have each of my solo scenes set up. So I have a solo me, solo co-host, solo guest. And so that way I can kind of engage and be looking at the guest and other host and kind of switch back and forth between them, because I do the producing of the show. I'm the technical person again, and so my co-host is just the pretty face.
Yeah.
So
Just shows up.
yeah, he shows up. I do all of the producing and stuff. But yeah, so it's nice because then I can do that and still talk with my hands and still keep eye contact and not have to worry about where my fingers are at on the other Stream Deck for those.
Yeah, that I think definitely is handy to have, if you're doing, I'm the same way. I'm constantly talking with my hands, which I think is often why, and I have the Stream Deck next to me and I never remember it's there. I'm always just, I don't know. I'm terrible for, when I'm focused, I completely lose track of anything that would make it easier. So yeah, I should learn more in the world of easier tools. Yeah. So Lala, it is these 2 things are available right now. So they're just, as I said, kind of hidden features, but they're absolutely there. Make sure you're updated on the latest version of Ecamm and you will have them. Is there any way to avoid YouTube removing live chat for replays if you make any edits to a live stream? I don't think so. Do you know this one, Andy?
I don't know. I'm not sure on that.
I think
Mr. Moderator might know.
Yeah, maybe Paul knows a little bit more than us, but I think if you make any edits to it, I think you
think so too.
Lose that, but I don't know for sure. That's a great question. Hey Bobby, thanks for hanging out. Yeah, see, this is one of the issues with Ecamm. Let's gripe about Ecamm. This is one of the issues with Ecamm is that they're constantly updating it, right? Ken and Glenn are always listening to what all of you are saying and suggesting and making, changes and little fixes. So sometimes there are a number of hidden features, but the cool thing about it is that you don't need them. If you are not missing it, that it's just there, great, it'll make your life, better or easier when you find it, but it's not like it's not like you have to be pushing all of the buttons and doing all the things to be successful, which is,
Right.
I
And
think, an important reminder for everyone.
it is. And like you said earlier, I really like what you said about hiding the windows. So you don't need to
Mm-hmm.
have all of the windows open. Just use
Close
what
those
you're going to
windows.
use.
Yeah.
So if you're not using if you're not going live and you're just recording, close out the comments.
Yep.
If you're not going to be actively moving or messing with your camera, take the camera effects and turn that,
Yep.
close that, because you can get to it easily by the main window with all of the
Yep.
shortcuts on the side. So
Yeah.
hide them if you don't need them.
Yeah. I never have the network camera one open. I'm like, I don't need that.
Yeah, you don't need that.
So there's there's lots of features that are in there that are great, but again, it may not be for you, or it may not be for you yet. So that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Totally fine. There's some great questions coming through here, so let me just make sure I catch everything. Let's see.
Sorry if there's lots of noise too. When I booked this conference room that I'm in, I didn't realize that they were having a party outside. I hear lots of
Oh
laughing.
no,
and
you're
things.
missing the party. Oh, Andy, I'm so
it's
sorry.
not my department. It's the marketing
okay.
department. I'm in a different conference room. So
the marketing department always knows how to party. Let me tell you. So here, Paul is sharing the that if you use Stream Deck, you can definitely do these multi-function keys. So you can be like, do this and then this and then this, so that you program in advance, which makes it easier. Yes, you can pose. And the screenshot works great on the pedal. All right, well, let's talk about some learning. So you've been at this for a really long time. What are kind of your biggest takeaways over your podcasting and video journey?
Oh man, biggest takeaways.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's been cool to just get to connect with people that I would have never got to connect with before.
Yeah.
It's just been, it's been cool to see, because it's easy to go, hey, I have a podcast, would you like to be on? And they may, if they're super famous, they may turn you down, or they may not answer. I've had that several times too. But you know what? I've got to the point in my journey where I'm like, it's okay if they don't answer and don't want to be on. That's their loss, not mine, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is a show that I'm producing, and if they don't want to be on it, well, like, who cares? And so, but I've also been surprised where I say, yeah, hey, would you come on? And people will be like, yeah, sure. I'd love to. So,
yeah, it is amazing to me how much we overthink that ask, because it really actually isn't all that big an ask. Like these days, it's pretty easy to jump on a show. Like it takes like seconds to be able to join in. It's really just a matter of scheduling and what your availability is. But even that is pretty easy these days with tools like Calendly and a bunch of the calendar schedule tools. So yeah, it's a lower lift than it probably feels. And if it's someone that is like in the same space as you, or they would get benefit from being on your show in the same way that you'd get benefit from having them, then it feels like a win-win.
Right. And again, just have to remind yourself, like, if they say no, they say no. They may look at your numbers and say it's not worth my time, and that's their loss.
Yeah. You get to, the networking too is, I think, really fun. I was recently on a couple of shows. So my personal show is all about movies. And so we've been getting more people asking to be on our show and inviting us to come onto their show. And it's always like, it's a fun experience to be on someone else's show, because you get to experience like how they are setting up and what the structure of their show is and how that guest experience is to join in. So like you learn a lot if you have your own show and are the creator or producer of a show. And then also it's just like neat to get to see and learn more about other people in your space. So we're all kind of busy. And so sometimes we have really good intentions of doing, networking time or spending time with each other, where I feel like this is, it locks that time in, and you get to spend time with people talking about, shared interests or shared passions, which I think is great from just a networking standpoint. It solidifies those relationships going forward. So if you have an ask of that person later and they've had a good experience on your show, or you've been, guest on their show, they're more likely to help out with that ask. They're more likely to, to want to know what you're up to than if you were just chatting back and forth with them, in an email or in a DM.
One of the things experiences that we had with the Dudes and Dads podcast recently was a local company put on a forum that they called Fathers Matter. And so the whole idea was to help get people involved. And so they had a lot of local nonprofits set up, and they had a speaker and everything. and we were able to actually put up our table, even though we're not a nonprofit. We were able to put up a table and kind of get our word out,
That's
set up
awesome.
a banner and things like that. And so that was a cool experience too, to be able to just have people walk up to your table and ask you, hey, what's your podcast about, and then tell them, and hopefully gain new listeners and new guests too. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things that I enjoyed, is people were like started telling me their stories, and I was like, yeah, I need to get you on the show. So exchanging contacts in real life over a show. 'Cause sometimes I think you forget if you're just doing a podcast that, yes, you can listen anywhere in the world, but sometimes it's cool to connect with people locally in your area, or go to somewhere in real life and be able to meet potential guests for your show.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's so nice that we're in this time and space where we now have all these amazing tools to be able to connect digitally, but we're also now able to get out and be in person with each other again. Because I think it is definitely different being face to face with people and having like a shared in-person experience than it is in this space where it's still certainly powerful and, again, better than if you're just chatting by email or in a different way. But I think there is a magic to in-person events and being able to go out to like podcasting or streaming like meetups, or or like you said, like a group where it's the topic is the same, right? So you're able to actually just share what you're all working on and get to know each other better. I think it goes a long way.
Yeah.
G. Albert would like to know what microphone are you using? How are you mic'd today?
So I just
Andy's
got
on location.
the Rode Wireless Pro.
Woo.
So that's a shot of my chest. But so I'm actually using the Wireless Pro today. I have it just the receiver hooked to my Mac, and
That's awesome.
and selected in the interview mode as my mic. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, it sounds great. And it's again like a really great reminder that I think in the Ecamm fam, and I think we're all guilty of this, we always want to do like the most and have the most. It's Doc's fault. It's entirely Doc's fault. We blame him. We could blame him completely, but you can still sound great with just a small amount of things.
Yes,
or you can still show up and be able to put on a great interview, or be able to connect with people, even if you're not in your home studio space, or if you don't have all the cool things behind you.
And to answer G. Albert's other part of the question, yes, I use a Mac for work, and so I am on my Mac, and Ecamm is running.
Yes, that is a good one.
It's always running. All
even
day,
if you were, always on. I know.
Yeah.
I thought for a while that would be like a really great marketing campaign, like Ecamm is always on, and then it sounded a little Big Brothery, like it was like Ecamm's watching you.
Yes,
it's always on. Yeah. Jeremy says that Doc is responsible for gear acquisition syndrome. Yes, he is, absolutely, and we are definitely all guilty of complicating things. I came to this conclusion like I guess it was probably about a year ago, where. So here when I'm in the studio, I have like all of the bells and whistles, and you will all be angry at me. I don't even use half of what we have here. Like we have stuff to test and play with, and then it kind of gets added to our collection. But at home, I only have a really I live in a super old farmhouse. It was built in 1730, so like really old.
Wow.
And so I like space is key, and I have an office, but my office is also my husband's office, is also my daughter's like craft and art room. So I only have like a tiny desk space, and I was like having a whole mirrorless camera set up here probably doesn't make sense. Like having like 85 million things over my desk because I want like all the cool stuff probably doesn't make sense. So I just downsized to, I now use I have currently an OBSBot Tiny 2. It's like this big.
And they're good quality too.
It's good quality, yep. And then I have my Shure MV7 because I love that one. But it folds down. I can put it under the desk when I'm not using it, which is great. And I think that. Oh, and I have actually I think an Elgato Key Light Air. So it's even not all that expensive a light, not all that big, and it's just clipped to the back of my desk. And that's it. Like that's, other than my laptop that I bring in and out, that is it. So yeah, if you're thinking that you need all these things to get started, you don't. Nope. And Andy has tons of these things and is still able to come in when he's not in front of all this space and still look and sound great. So it's a good reminder for all of us.
I thought about bringing my Rodecaster in, but then I was like, nah, I don't need to bring that out of the studio.
We did. I downsized to the Rodecaster Pro Duo here in the office because we, for the most part, only need 2 microphones anyway instead of 4. But I love it for the glowy light buttons. That's
I noticed
the
that
level that
Alec has one like in the background of his studio
yeah.
just for glowy lights.
Yeah, the glowy lights are the best. There's something about like colorful glowy lights that just make us all feel better at everything.
Yes,
It goes a long way. Lala says the Tiny 2 doubles as her camera when she's moving around the craft room. Yeah, so that was something, and I was on Lala's show, but like having an overhead camera, was something I didn't have. So I'm trying to be able to add that. And I'm doing more Amazon videos too. So like I'd be using my phone for that more often. What's in your home studio or your common studio space? Let's geek out.
So a couple webcams. I eventually would like to get some mirrorless cameras.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm just using a couple webcams.
Yeah.
And for the Dudes and Dads podcast, we actually have 2 different studios. We record at the church for the one because that's easier to bring guests in than in my house.
Sure, yeah.
For podcast answers, I just do it in my house. But for the Dudes and Dads show, we have a Rodecaster Pro and the webcams, and then we're using the SM7Bs for mics.
Ooh, fancy. We upgraded to those ones here in the office because Glenn wanted them here. So here they are. I'm not like good enough I know that there is a difference in audio quality, and I like sort of hear it, but I don't notice a big difference between this one and the MV7, if I'm being honest with everyone.
I tested out the MV7 because we thought about getting those instead, and I didn't like the sound compared to this. I know they're similar, they're close, but we went with the SM7Bs.
Yeah, you and Glenn are kindred spirits. He's like, don't you hear it? I was like, I don't really. I'm sorry. I guess I'm not an audiophile. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and Paul's saying having like the smaller webcams is great if you do any kind of traveling. And it is amazing like how easy it is to capture content when you're on the go, and it's becoming more and more accessible now that a lot of these gear companies are making like higher end products smaller and more affordable. So like what Andy's got with the Rode.
The Rodecaster Duo is super tiny. Compared to the full Pro, and easy to take. I've thought about getting one, but then I'm like, do I need one just to have for travel?
Yeah. Yeah. If it makes you feel any better, I don't bring this one with us for the most part unless we have like, we're doing an interview on the go where we know there's going to be a few of us, so we need to be able to do that. But yeah, normally we're just flying with less equipment. It's always fun going through the airport with all this kind of stuff. I feel like I'm kind of a big deal. These are all of my cameras and microphones. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, we're nearing the end of the hour, which always blows me away how quickly it passes. Anything else that you want to share with the Ecamm fam? Any learnings, cool tips or tricks, anything else we should know?
One of the things that I've started doing recently, just because I have a lot of things going on, and I sometimes complicate things too much, is I've really taken to the whole thing that Doc talks about, doing the mechanicals scene. So a scene that you're not going to show on screen, but it has all of your information on it. So, like for me, what I've put in there is, placeholder camera A is my guest, placeholder B is myself, placeholder C is my co-host, and that way I know how the scenes are built without having to go back into each scene and go, oh right, that's the camera, because in case they get messed up or whatever. So that's something that I've taken to, even though I don't pass my profile around, but
it's like a checklist, though.
It's a checklist, kind of a pre-show go live checklist, to make sure you know what you're doing. And then the nice thing about that too is if you do end up exporting that profile and sending it to someone, they have all of the information and know what fonts you're using and all of that. Yeah,
because it does actually you spend a lot of time finding those things if you don't do something like that. Like it's going back and forth and being like, okay, what font was it that I used in the last one, or having to like reset that. And I am very bad with like, I go through like these cycles of, oh, my desktop is too like cluttered with stuff. So I move everything into folders, and then I have to reset everything in Ecamm, where I'm like, oh shoot, I moved all those files that were, linked in Ecamm to something. So it's good to, I think, to have like a checklist and make sure you know where everything is.
And one of the, I was saying that I'm always learning. I learned last week on the show when Paul did the Learn Ecamm. I didn't think about the fact of also in that mechanicals folder to put your screen that has your border radius and your border color, because you can copy and paste the styles too.
Yeah.
So that's been helpful too, because that way when you create something new, you can easily just go and paste the style to it and keep it the same.
Yeah. Huge thanks, Paul. You killed it
Yeah.
on the demo. And Andy has done a demo too. So, if you're sitting here and you're like, hang on a sec, you can swing over and watch both Andy and Paul do demos at any point. And if you want to do a demo yourself, you can always let us know if you're interested in being a moderator or interested in helping out there. We are only an email away. We would always love that help. Well, let's swing over here quickly. Well, just in case any lingering questions come in. Since we're talking about learning, we should remind everyone that Leap into Tools and Tactics is coming up 2 weeks. I was going to say next week, not next week, the week after. 2 weeks, April 24th through 26th. It is like packed with content. So you probably want the replay pass unless you're going to like real power it through like we are. But it is 3 very, very full days, just because there were so many good like sessions and topics to cover. But we're going to cover like all of this. So it was a good lead in what Andy just said, where, sometimes you don't even know what you don't know, and you're wasting time that you could be saving because there's an AI tool out there that you haven't heard of yet, or maybe you're the opposite and you're like using too many tools that you're wasting time going into, all these different places. So we're going to cover everything from like how to audit where you're at, how to build different plans, what AI tools are out there, how to save time. We're going to be talking about podcasts and live shows as well as recorded videos. So it's really all encompassing, and I promise has content for every single part of kind of the content creation journey, as well as all, good, helpful information for anyone, no matter what background or what level you're at. So please swing on over to leap.ecamm.com and grab your free pass. Upgrade to a replay pass if you really want to like get all that information and be able to get those added notes. As Paul is saying, is 9 sessions each day. So when I say there's a lot of content, there's a lot of content. Yeah. There's a lot of content, but I think it's going to be really fun. Tatiana's saying it's a gorgeous photo of Doc, as well as our lady podcasters, which I always love that photo because it just feels like that's how I like envision podcasting. It's like glass of wine on the sofa, hanging out. With a charcuterie board, right? Being able to. Oh, well, this was so fun, Andy. We'll have to do this again. Thanks. Obviously, we need. Yeah, you and I need to like co-host a demo. Then you can give me my IT confidence.
Perfect. Let's do it.
I think it'd be super fun. And since I see Tatiana hanging out here with us, I should also remind you all that tomorrow, Tatiana's going to do an entire session. I'm gonna sit in the shadows and ask questions, but she's gonna do one all about presentation skills and camera confidence and how to avoid that kind of virtual stage fright. So if you're sitting here and you get like the butterflies in your stomach at the idea of doing what Andy and I just did, we have all been there and we're still there in many cases. So join us for that. I think it'll be a really good. Session. Looks like you better upgrade. Time to upgrade your Leap package. Upgrade all the things. No, just kidding. Do what feels best for you.
I think next time I do a podcast, I'm gonna get a charcuterie board. I mean, that just sounds like something we need to do while podcasting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just something about a charcuterie board. I wonder what they used to be called. I feel like in the last couple of years, they're like everywhere now. And I'm like, did we used to I feel like we had cheese and meat boards. Maybe we just didn't have a fancy name for it.
We just called it a snack.
Yeah, snack board. Yeah, with a charcuterie board. We're here. We're here for the important photos. And yeah, Paul just dropped the link. So how to overcome virtual stage fright. Be sure to join us for that tomorrow. Well, thank you, Andy, so much for hanging out and for being there amidst a cool party. We know you could have snuck and pretended to be marketing, but we appreciate you spent time with us.
I'm marketing at heart. I mean, like, we all market our podcast, right? So marketing at heart.
Exactly. Well, you can find Andy in our Ecamm community, at Discord, sometimes in the live chat, and then shout out those links again, Andy, so we can find your podcasts.
dudesanddadspodcast.com or podcastanswers.com.
Yes, and those are in the description of this video, and Paul's been dropping them in the chat as well. So definitely give them a listen.
And actually, I noticed Paul got the right link. I actually just switched from Dudes and Dads podcast to Dudes and Dads. I acquired the dudesanddads.com, and so
we're throwing Paul for a loop.
both go there.
Good. Glad to hear it. All right, so if you're confused, there's two links, but you'll end up in the same spot. That's a smart move, actually.
Yep.
All right. Well, we will see you all next time. And if you want to be on this show, you are always welcome. Swing to the description. You can grab that link to snag some time. Would love to have you on the show. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.